Hello, hello, and good morning to everyone that has had an opportunity to join us. My name is Damon Torgerson, and I am CEO of Alludo, and Alludo and Classtime are proud to present this webinar with Nate Ridgway and Dr. Angie Ridgway. One moment. This is an online conference hosted and moderated by myself and Valentine Roost, CEO of Classtime. He's off camera right now, but he'll be here very shortly. It's a 45-minute webinar, and we're going to be recording this. So if you're an attendee and you have to leave early or something like that, then it'll be made available to you later. And if you're scrambling to keep notes or whatever, we'll be sharing this with you as well. So enjoy the webinar. We will want to make it as engaging as possible. So ask questions in the chat window of Nate and Angie, and we moderate, Valentine and myself will try and moderate that and provide questions to them to get your feedback to them as soon as possible. And now I'm going to turn it over to Valentine.
Yes, thanks, Damon. I'm also thrilled to welcome you to EduCraftCon. Today we have several fantastic speakers lined up, and I'm excited to kick it off with Don't Ditch That Tech, Personalizing Content and Promoting Metacognition with Dr. Angie Ridgway and Nate Ridgway. Dr. Angie Ridgway is a professor and director of secondary education at the University of Indianapolis, and she's now working with future secondary teachers at the university level. She's also the co-author of the upcoming book, Don't Ditch That Tech, together with our second speaker, co-author Nate Ridgway. Nate is a tech-loving world history and dual-credit U.S. history teacher in Indianapolis, and he specializes in lesson design and differentiation, and is also licensed in special education mild interventions. And so, without further ado, I'm excited to hand over the word to Angie and Nate. Welcome.
Thanks, Valentine. Hi, as Valentine mentioned, Nate and I are on the verge of full publication of a work entitled Don't Ditch That Tech. It's part of the Ditch series we've co-authored with Matt Miller to offer teachers practical advice for using technology to better differentiate lessons for their learners.
Yeah, and so kind of the last 2 years for us have been very much kind of a step of like actually going and exploring kind of a really difficult world that we're about to talk about, which is where all this new technology and all these new devices that we have meets all of the increasing and really complex student needs that we have in our classroom. So without further ado, Valentine and Damon were very nice to go ahead and introduce us. So please don't hesitate to ask questions as we go, but we're going to go ahead and jump right into it. So I think where we kind of wanted to start with talking to you guys today, and also this webinar, is what we're scared of. For myself, it's mannequins. I'm deathly afraid of anything that appears human-like and isn't. And I'll let you, Mom, explain yours.
So if you haven't figured out, Nate and I are a mother-son team. And he knows that I don't like roller coasters. I don't find anything fun about roller coasters. I'm short of stature and like to keep my feet on the ground. So I'm a little bit reluctant to even think about a kiddie roller coaster. So we're going to make the connection today between the reticence or reluctance we often have between not only technology, but trying that challenging task of differentiating for all the kids in your classrooms. So Nate, if you can go back one slide so everybody can get that presentation access for us.
Let's go back. So you can see down there at the bottom, there's a bit.ly. It's this bit.ly, so bit.ly / and then EduCraftRidge, which is EduCraft and then RIDGE, and that'll take you out to our presentation. So once you actually get to that particular site, we, just like we do in our classrooms, we really encourage you to actually play around with all the tools that we're about to show and discuss. And the slide that you're about to get access to is what we call a hyper slide. Everything is interactive and playable, clickable, those kind of things. And we'll kind of explain kind of like how to work through the presentation, kind of how as we're going. If you want the low tech option though, if you don't really want to go through the whole presentation bit, we do have the handout, which is also available. If you go to the chat window, you'll see a button over there that's green, and you can click on that. You can get the PDF of it.
So while everyone's getting acclimated, could you post on the chat your name, your first name, and the level of students you work with, please?
And then as a follow-up to that, can you also just, and again, there's no right or wrong answer to this, what is your own definition of differentiation? Trying to find the right kind of teaching that will most positively affect a student's learning style and motivation. Definitely. Tailoring instruction to meet individuals' needs. It's funny, we use that exact same term, tailoring, in our book.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm.
K-8. Ooh, K8. That's a big range. And I think so far, like what people have definitely posted is really accurate about differentiation. There's so many like different little elements of like whether it's individualized instruction or looking at like students' learning styles or what motivates them in the classroom. There's so many like different little elements that can that you can kind of pick apart, and you can kind of get into those kind of nuanced little areas.
So we have, Nate, personalizing content to maximize student learning, trying to find the right kind of teaching that will most positively affect a student's learning style and motivation, multiple options for taking in information, tailoring instruction to meet individual needs, and instructional tech.
Oh yeah, she's an instructional tech. Okay, cool.
Okay, very good.
Wonderful. Sorry, driving. All right. So, with that all being said, as we kind of get into here in our presentation, you saw in our topic that when you registered for it, that we're obviously going to be tackling two things, which we feel are kind of like two of the most challenging areas with doing differentiation, and that is metacognition and personalizing content. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and get moving on just a little bit. And so before we get going on into like the actual stuff that we're going to talk about, we do want to know, we talked about those fears that myself and my mom has. What are some things about differentiation that might be scary or difficult, or something that might cause you some doubt about it? And you can share if you're comfortable. If you're not, that's okay too. We'll give you just about a minute here to post that. And then once we kind of look at some of those, we'll kind of go on and talk about some actual things that you can do. I'll go ahead and post my own while I'm sitting here.
Time.
Yeah, time. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Create a classroom culture that embraces personalization. Some kids just want the easy stuff. Mm-hmm. It's definitely true. There's this like very careful bridge that all teachers have to walk. That's kind of like between two things, which is like you want to obviously meet your students where they are, but you also at the same time have to push them where they have to go, and that can be a very difficult kind of tightrope, so to speak, to walk.
Right, and we'll talk about some time-saving ideas too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's before we get too too far in, because obviously like we could, I'm sure lots of us could talk for a long time about what makes differentiation very nervous and scary, is let's kind of talk about why both my mom and myself and Matt, who unfortunately couldn't join us today, are here. So we kind of feel like this is our reality right now, is that at least in the last couple of years and sort of decade or so of education, is that like all of the new technology that teachers have been given hasn't come with any kind of an instruction manual. And at the same time that like we get all this new 21st century tech, it's us teachers trying to run and catch up to it. And at the same time, our student needs are becoming more diverse and are becoming more complex. Like we have to deal with IEPs and 504s and English language learners. And we're kind of like trying to run a race where we're clearly not having a good time, all the time, so to speak. And so like we kind of feel like we, as we were kind of sitting down to like really begin to write and kind of talk about some of these ideas, like this is like an area that we felt like we could focus on and that we could tackle in like a really meaningful way, and try to give you and definitely like walking out of the session, we want you to feel like you have something that you can take away the very next day and actually use in your classroom, no matter your content area and no matter your age of the kids that you actually teach.
And one of the things that I pointed out to Nate, because I'm in so many different classrooms, as some of you have reiterated that you are, is that there appears to be a different entry point for different teachers related to the integration of technology in their classrooms. And it's not always age dependent. So I've got to say that since I'm the old person in the group, it's not always necessarily age dependent, but some teachers jump right in, they learn the technology, they figure out how to use it to differentiate. Other teachers are almost afraid of starting the technology. And then all of us, I think, can find that using instructional technology as a new pedagogical support takes tremendous time to learn the tech tools. So we're going to present to you today some tools that everyone can use at his or her own level of entry. So that the next step on the model is placing ourselves really on the, oh wait, we're going to go to the educational models. And
yeah. So I guess we should, before we get to like our solution for kind of this, I did want to show you like some things that are out there right now about all these different educational models that we do have. And so the ones that you see here, just post in the chat if you recognize one of them. I didn't put the titles of them, but let's see if you actually recognize what the model is. And then from there, we can actually kind of show you our particular solution. So to see if you know the name of any of these, perhaps you recognize them if you're, been around the kind of education block of, a little bit. Blooms. Actually, I don't. Oh, I didn't know we don't have the updated version of Blooms on here, do we? We don't have DOK, but yes, Blooms is one of them. Up in the top right. Yeah, Sammer. Sammer is an interesting one. For me, Sammer,
or we've had multiple people know Sammer.
I know, like this is one of the very few. Like I know, and I feel like we have more instructional coaches here. Oh, yay, somebody got gardeners. Okay, good. So like, yeah, Sammer's interesting. It's more of a kind of a student-centric model about how the students are using technology, which is kind of our focus here, but you'll see that we'll kind of take in a different direction that hopefully makes it a little bit more practical. Okay, the one that nobody's gotten yet is in the top left. That's the 21st century skills. So collaboration, communication, if you're not familiar with that, that model. So yes, the 4 C's as they're known. So yeah, we have all of these things, but the thing that we don't have, we don't have a model for this, and that's help teachers understand how they should differentiate with technology. We don't have a model for this, and so this is one, like when my mom and I and Matt were like really sitting down and like thinking about this, we're like, why do we have all these new tools and we have such a challenge with how many like our needs that our students have? Like, we don't have a way, we don't have a framework that we can operate out of to understand this. And so this is our model here. And so this is really like the heart of our book that we'll be releasing here in less than a month. And so what we've done is we created 5 archetypes, basically. And these archetypes, as you kind of go down the model, so to speak, the way that the teacher uses technology becomes more student-centered, and it becomes much more intensive in terms of the actual differentiation that happens.
And so the teacher can enter at any level. His or her entry point could be any different level. From, I know I have colleagues who are almost entirely teacher-led. That's not uncommon at the university level with the old model of lecture and sit and get. Don't quote me on that outside of here. So teachers could enter the model at the pilot stage, where really the teacher is in control of the technology and leading the technology and very comfortable with all the technologies that are in the classroom, to the museum exhibitor, where technology is used for interactivity, to the restaurant owner for student-chosen processes and the way in which he or she learns. So that'll sound very much like Carol Ann Tomlinson's work on differentiation, or perhaps universal design for learning, where you open up access for students to learn content in different ways, all the way to the creative art coach that's very student-driven. They're choosing aspects of content that meet the standard being taught in the classroom, and then lots of quality feedback and promotion of metacognition.
Mm-hmm. And so you can kind of see here that the archetypes kind of should make sense with actually like what the students are doing. So again, like students are kind of along for the ride. If you're a pilot, they're actually, you know, if you go to like a modern day exhibit of a museum today, they're actually, you know, you can play with things, you can interact with it, but students don't have any input on what's actually in the museum itself, so to speak, the museum being your classroom. So kind of what you're beginning to see here is that as you kind of go down our model, the students are taking more ownership and they're having more input about what's actually happening in your classroom. So yeah, so like please, because and as my mom did post, like if you have questions about this model, like please don't hesitate to ask, because obviously there's much more to it here than we're going to have time in the, you know, just these 45 minutes to talk about it. What we do want to focus on today though is the 2 things that really is going to be the essence of our presentation, and that is how can we take like that model that we just talked about and create some really personalized content experiences for kids, and then how can we also begin to have them do the intellectual weightlifting in the classroom, actually have them develop and practicing metacognitive kind of abilities and skills in your actual room. So I think the one that we want to tackle first, right, is content experiences. So we will dive into that. If you're following us on the sessions here, I'll just kind of give you a quick like 30-second guide on how to use hyperslides. Everything you're about to see is clickable. And so we are now on slide number 8. Okay, you can see that I've highlighted it up here and I've kind of blown it up large so you can see that. What you can do just to follow along with this, you can literally go to the little, the human character face here and you can click on where it says personalized content. From that point, because like the presentation is going to go to a lot of different slides and a lot of different things, we highly recommend that you click on the home button that is down in the corner of the slides, and that will take you back always, no matter what, to this slide right here in case you get lost. Okay, but we're going to go ahead if you'd like to join us, and we're going to click on that personalized content, the yellow character right here. Okay. So kind of this section for us is like really the very main core of our book, which is like how do you actually create in a realistic way varied personalized content experiences, because we know like this is now my 6th year of teaching. Mom, I'm sure it's, you know, with how young you are, it's like your 2nd, right? Right. That like we know that differentiation is hard, it's time consuming, it can be really confusing, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I have to make not just like 1 lesson, but I have to make 3. But the thing that we have here is that technology gives us such an opportunity to eliminate how much time that it takes or how quickly that we can do things. It's so efficient, and we can make decisions about differentiation in our classroom really effectively and very intentionally with technology that we couldn't do before. And that's kind of what we want to show you here.
Let me add to that, Nate.
Mm-hmm.
I think in working with beginning teachers, and it sounds like many of you are coaching teachers, I think this is one of the most difficult things to teach a teacher to do. So I would say also to think about emphasizing with teachers that the integration of technology, especially varying the content, making the content more meaningful, will help improve the teacher's classroom management once he or she gets going. And that's often a concern of beginning teachers as well.
Yes. So the quote here that we have from Carolyn Tomlinson, and she is absolutely wonderful and is very gracefully written a foreword for, or actually an endorsement for our book. You're going to see here that really like what Carolyn Tomlinson's talking about with differentiation is that we're doing some very active planning here. We like to think that with differentiation in the classroom, like the best teachers who do it are not the teachers who are problem solvers. They're the ones who are problem expectors, and they can kind of predict what is going to be most effective to their students once they get to know them, and kind of once they have that experience, and can really take some time to begin to plan. So what we've done for you here, okay, is again, like if you're kind of like thinking about this on our model, is that you're going to start to notice that we are starting to dive down closer to these bottom kind of areas here. The student chosen process, students having more input, those kind of things. Because now we're starting to have the point where like students are basically having more of an input actually on the curriculum itself. Okay, you can go ahead with this if you'd like to. Mom.
So in this time, in this portion of the model, the teacher is really turning over more choice to the students, which does promote intrinsic motivation and that authenticity, or searching for his or her own resources, integrating resources, content resources into projects as both an exploration and a product, really does motivate the students to learn the material.
Mm-hmm. And so on your own during these time, we're about to introduce a series of apps here. We'll only probably go into a couple of them just because of how much time we have. But on your own, if, no matter kind of like what role, if you look up there, like we have the different icons for the 5 different roles, we really encourage you to, to use this time as like, if you're, perhaps like a pilot or a museum exhibitor, like this is a time where you can like, oh, like here's one thing that I could try in the next class. That's a really small step. We really emphasize in the book very heavily, like poco al poco, like, like little by little, step by step, to try to do some of these kind of more differentiated things. If you feel like you've already got a really good handle on this though, again, like restaurant, lab, to kind of or restaurant, kind of like owner to creative art coach, that you kind of like, this is a refinement time for you. You can add something to your practice that you currently do right now. So let's go ahead and check these out. So differentiating content with 5 apps. What's new to you? So what we want to do is with the apps that we talk about with differentiating content, we don't want to spend obviously too much time with talking about ones that you guys are familiar with. We'd rather show off how to differentiate content with apps that you might not have heard of before in some kind of meaningful way. So if you can post like what apps are least familiar to you, that would be really helpful in terms of kind of driving our discussion here. And we'll give you about 30 seconds to a minute to kind of have input on that. I see that we've got
Insert Learning, IORAD, and Classtime.
IORAD and Classtime are new. Insert Learning and Classtime. IORAD and Classtime. We should also note, as people begin to post here, which is wonderful, if you are watching this later, all of these links will still be live, and you can go check them out. Again, if we don't talk about an app, we still have provided the links to it where you can go and explore. So I'm seeing quite a lot of Insert Learning.
And IORAD and Classtime.
IORAD and Classtime. Do you want to do those 3?
Yeah, let's do those 3 if that's good with the audience.
Perfect. So here's what we'll do. We're just going to kind of go in and show you again, like our feature here. What you'll begin to notice is a very common theme is that like this is not like an app. Like, let's check out this cool new app that you haven't heard of. Like, we're talking here about very intentional use of the technology and how we're using it in our classroom. The technology isn't driving our instruction. Our instruction is being kind of enhanced by the actual technology that we're using at the time. So let's go check out IORAD first. I'm literally, just like you guys, I am going to actually just click on IORAD itself, and we're just gonna go out and check it out. Now, why IORAD is really, really cool, and why I would use it for, like in my classroom, is it's an absolutely wonderful app for providing your students tutorials. So if you've ever had like a situation or like you've been in like a cart in a lab before, but you find that like it's taking you so much time to actually come up with instructions for your students about what they're supposed to be doing. And I'll share my IORAD screen here with you. This makes it so much easier. What it does is it creates interactive tutorials where like the students don't have just like a piece of paper that they're following, like of instructions on what to do. They actually have to do on the screen what the tutorial like it's actually prompting them to do. So I'll just kind of give you an example here from one that I have in my class, and I can show you. I just used this the other day. And so it's wonderful, absolutely, for me, essential, like if I have a flipped classroom, because it gives students like that extra bit of support that they really need and that I can't be present, with them for. Or for example, if I have like struggling learners in a whole variety of categories, it can be really, really useful in that kind of a view as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just kind of click through here. You can see here, it's actually telling me over on the right-hand side, like what I actually need to do in order to like actually do the particular procedure. So if it says click here to complete the warrant for today, and I actually have to click like there on the screen, or it says, for example, if I, step 2 or 3, it says read the instructions for the activity. And I actually have to read, and it pauses. You can see like that delay there where like it actually forced like the student to not like click through it. Like they have to actually sit there and read it. Or then it says click here to access the resources you'll need. And they actually have to click on the resource. And so IORAD and this tutorial that it makes, you can share them out with students. They can access them at any time. It is wonderfully helpful for those students who feel like need that additional support of like very kind of like procedural or kind of step-based knowledge.
Nathan, can you interrupt, please?
Yeah,
because we had a question come in about English language learners. And so IORAD, and I'm a modern language teacher, so this is a little bit more my area. IORAD immediately provides that connection between the visual on the screen and the language that you want the student to learn. So it's a visual support too for English language learners or struggling readers.
And the tutorials don't take long to make. Like IORAD's free. All these apps that we're going to show have some kind of a free component to them. I mean, once you actually kind of get used to like actually, like making a tutorial, you can do them in Chrome, you can do them on your desktop. They take maybe 5 minutes.
And that would be something in a system that you could share with your colleagues. So if you wanted your families to be more in tune with how Canvas works or your grading system.
Yeah, how to use Sky.
Prepare the IORAD that could be shared among the team. So think about how you can work a little bit smarter and not harder. Shall we go to class time next?
Yes. And it's really cool that like a lot of people asked about class time, even though like class time is sponsoring the session, because that means like obviously you heard about it maybe from like another party or something like that. Class time for me is I don't really have another way to say it. Like it's like my go-to tool. Yeah. Like I simply could not teach without it because it is like it's that influential on how I make decisions about how my classroom runs. So we're going to go ahead and show it off. Again, I'm just going to click right on class time. And what you've just gotten there is an invitation from me, and that's like my personal referral code. If you use that and eventually you decide, it's a freemium app, so there's a free version and a premium. If you do it, eventually decide to sign up for the premium version, that gives you about 2 months for free, which is wonderful. But anyways, that all aside, let's talk about what Classtime does. So if you just go and sign up with Google, you can get an account. It's very, very simple. I'm going to go ahead and log into mine, and then I can kind of show you like how I actually use it in my classroom.
One of the things, while he's doing that, one of the things I really like about Classtime, since I travel between classrooms, is that all I have to do is put up a code and my students are in. We're not creating a bunch of accounts, trying to get to this website, blah, 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 blah. It's just very simple. I list the code. I make it live. I can turn the app on. I can turn it off for the students, which is really important in higher ed because they might want to share across their classes. This happens in high schools too. And so I love the flexibility of Classtime.
Yes. So for those of you who are like not exactly sure like what the app does, well, let's get to the heart of it first. It's a very quick, rapid fire kind of assessment kind of app. So if you're familiar with like Socrative or kind of quizzes in a way or things like that, it's kind of like this in some sense. But for me, like the functionality of it beats those other apps in some ways. And then also it's got some additional features on it too that are really, really nifty and very handy. So what you get with Classtime is a library. Now, just like some of those other apps that are out there, there's like a bajillion questions you can go and go and rip to make your own question sets. But why it's really, really useful and how I use it to differentiate content in my classroom is, let's say, for example, and I just pulled up an example one, the life cycle of a plant. If I had taught this the day before, and I'm really thinking about like, okay, like today, like as we take like the next step on talking about like, let's break down like photosynthesis today. Like if you want to check and make sure that your students are ready for that, or if you're going to break them out into groups following that, you can start this session as like a warm up or like a bell ringer with your students. And so what they do, and again, like you kind of figure out Classtime pretty quickly. There's lots of settings you can do, but once students have this code and they log in and you just simply distribute it to them and they punch it in, what it begins to look like for the teacher, and we'll go ahead and like show you like a preview of what it actually looks like, is I start to get all of this really practical, actionable data that I can make use of right away. And the ability for students to get in, like you can have them log in like with a Google account, or you can just have them log in with just that code and then they type in a name. Like it's really fast and it's really, really simple. And I get data that I can make use of very quickly.
And so that's what I put in the chat, Nate, that I love about Classtime. It's live. Literally, if my students are running off course, I can kind of cue them and explain something. One day I actually tapped the wrong answer. And so I marked the wrong answer as correct. And so I saw that we were going down the wrong path. And so I love the fact that you can, while they're working, you can make adjustments.
Yes, exactly. And the thing is here, like you can go down and like the individual questions you can ask and you can break it down that way. Like there's so much like actionable data that I can make off of this. Like if I see that Lev Tolstoy and Astrid Lindgren have gotten this question wrong, like I can make some very key decisions about like how I'm actually, differentiating content then from that point on with those particular students.
Okay, so Nathan's really talking about even pre-assessment. But here's two different ways that I've used it. The questions come up. If this is an assessment tool, how can we use it for differentiation? It's very easy to mold the questions in Classtime, both with the format and then the format in terms of how the students respond, but also by mixing up the questions. So you literally could hand students a code. The blues are working on this code, the reds are working on this code, the yellows are working on this code, and you could have created that assessment and changed it in 10 minutes time for all three groups.
Yes.
So it's very malleable, it's easy to use, it's easy to launch. In terms of other differentiation, you could change the nature of the questions. within class time, from multiple choice, maybe for a learner who needs more scaffolding, to free response for a learner who needs more challenge. You could also do, as Nathan indicated, you could use a few questions as a pre-assessment, and then you could pull the data from that to do varied grouping, so that students are either in homogeneous or heterogeneous groups, depending on your instructional need and the support that they need. Another thing I used class time for this last semester, I had a few students who needed to rewrite a portion of a paper. And so I gave them a cue in class time, just like a prompt in class time, and they rewrote a portion. And the wonderful thing about that was it loads it all for me. Boom, 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 boom. I don't have to go through all these files looking for the portion of the paper that they rewrote. It's all right there.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's one last thing we will talk about with class time, and then we probably need to get moving on to our another section. And that is one other kind of additional feature that I kind of hinted at earlier is something called collaborative challenges. So what these do is you take any question set that you actually have in the class, and the students have to work collaboratively with each other to make a certain animation happen or make a certain thing occur. And so what you're seeing right now is a simulation of what one of these challenges look like. And you can see the students in this case are engineering a roller coaster. And the better that the class does, the more that the coaster gets engineered. And why I really like it is that it's not like a Kahoot or a quizzes where like my students are like so cutthroatly competitive with each other. Here, like they all have to ensure that they all do well, or as you know, as it says here, like they failed this particular challenge. Yeah.
So that's great for social learning and promoting that collaboration, that 21st century skill. Okay, Nathan,
Yes.
we should probably go to the next one because we're down to 7 minutes. Please
Yes,
keep typing your questions because we'll take those.
So let's go to metacognition. I'm just going to click this home button here, and I'm going to click over on the right-hand side to go to the promote metacognition section. Okay, if it doesn't work for me, my internet's being a little bit slow. I'm just going to go ahead and jump to slide number 14. It's the one that I'm on. So with metacognition, what you're going to start to see here is that like metacognition does play a really, really big role in differentiation. And the idea is that we're trying to give students the actual understanding and capacity that they are the ones in charge of taking over their own learning. We firmly believe that the ultimate, as it says here, like the ultimate goal is to become a teacher who can is not to become a teacher who can differentiate, but to help students learn how to differentiate for themselves. And really when you get to that point, like that's when students are really taking on the burden of actually learning in your particular classroom. So again, like depending on like what role you thought that you were on our model, we really want this to be like a time where you can experiment and grow and try like one new thing in your classroom, you know, like the next day, whether that's a class time session or some of these apps that we're going to show here in just a second. Mom, why don't you go ahead and explain Google Forms, and I can help out chat for a minute, and then we can kind of tackle VoiceThread and Penzu then after that.
Okay. I've used Google Forms a lot in the last year because I have very young college students for goal setting. And I think one of you asked the question about how do you promote motivation and that kind of intrinsic motivation that we know is the most sustaining for students. And one of the things that I've used forms for is to ask questions. And we do have a sample here. I think it's a sample from your high school classroom, however, that's on this handout, where students set many goals for themselves. So they may have done an assessment, or they may have done a project or working on a project. And you ask them to set attainable goals for themselves to accomplish, which if they're setting them for themselves, they're more invested in attaining that goal. And they can even in the form ask for what support they need to accomplish this goal. And I think that's what you had in this particular one.
Yeah, so in this one, like I was actually having the students like reflect upon the progress that they had made. And that's the example that we give right here. You're more than welcome to check it out. Where I was having like students actually think about like the goals that they were accomplishing with a project. And my students just completed, it was the one project that wasn't on here, but I'll give you another instance of it. Is a hip hop project where they had to like take a current hip hop song, because we're doing the history of that right now, and they had to kind of break it down. But like the progress of like actually like completing that project and making Google Slides and like having to present like that, those kind of skills are not something that students can just like, you know, immediately accomplish. And so like in the actual like form that I did on this one, which again I'll pull up here. Again, Google Forms isn't like any of the technology here that we're showing isn't like crazy or innovative or like super different. It's how we're actually using them to accomplish something very particular in the class. So like the students had to select, like I wanted them to have this kind of like honest moment with themselves, like have you started on your project? Have you made some progress? Have you made really good progress, or are you done? Like, what help do you need from me? What do you think that you need to work on more? So like having them take that time to actually like break down where they are can help the students take on, like we always think of it like, who's doing the intellectual weightlifting in your class? Mm-hmm. Is it you, the teacher, or is it your students? And ultimately, like, although it may feel like really good for me to get buff, like intellectually, it's exhausting. And we really think that your students should be thinking harder than you, in doing more of the thinking in your classroom than you are.
Let me chime in here if I could, Nathan. I also have my students turn this into an email to their significant cheerleader. And so they took these responses and said to their cheerleader, here's how I'm doing in the class, here's what's helping me, and here's how I need to improve, trying to empower the people in their lives to support them. Now, for my students, it might have been family or a significant other because they're adult age, but that opens up the communication about learning that way. The other thing I've used it for is to give my administrators context. So the students are really talking about how much support they need. I ask them how much they're reading, all of those kinds of questions. So if there are low grades in a course, then your administrator knows, okay, I have 5 students who said they're not ever reading anything. And it does give them a little bit better context in terms of how you're setting up your learning and how you're promoting support for your kids. So I think it's a nice thing for a teacher to have in the evaluation process.
Yeah. And you'll notice below, like if you're like not a Google school, there's lots of other apps out there that can do the exact same thing. We put some other apps there below that you can use: OneNote, Padlet, Answer Garden, Google Calendar even. And all of those are, again, wonderful tools that can be used in very, very similar situations.
So we have about 1 minute for questions, I think, Nathan.
I know we're running out of time. It flies by so fast. So like with the time that we do have remaining, we did want to, and as we're kind of like ending here, again, we didn't get to these couple of areas, and we know that we missed like lots of apps before, but we do have to very shamelessly plug that we have so many of these things that we would love to talk and share with you about. But if you get the time, if you follow us on Twitter, it's at Teach from Ridge there. There's our book right there. It will be out on June 18th. And we would love to enter you into a raffle for a free copy of the book. So please, like, again, if you enjoyed here, you'd like to learn more, our information, the link to the Twitter is right there. And then also, if you go back and like where you originally like found access to the presentation there, that's our blog. And there are many, many resources that you can go and consult that we haven't talked about today.
Well, thank you go ahead.
I just wanted to add, someone asked about price. I don't think we had any that were for cost.
Nope.
On those promoting metacognition. I really like Google Forms for that, but Penzu is also nice because it's an open journal. So I want to answer that.
All the apps that we showed today are free.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was a delightful presentation. I know I learned a lot, and that was a lot of help. And the book looks awesome, so that's fantastic. And you jumped ahead to my question about how do these folks reach out to you on Twitter or wherever. Is there any other way to contact you that you want to share with the group?
Yes. So well, let me switch tabs here. I'm going to go all the way back to the very beginning of the presentation. And this link, if you click it and follow it, so let me change window here so you can actually see. So this is our blog that we write on, but down here it says to reach out to Nate and Angie, whether that's the book. If you want to click here, that's a landing page for our book. You can sign up for email notifications there. If it's professional development, you can click here, and we'd be more than happy. We offer anything from really short sessions to like this, to something that's more kind of like a day-long experience. And we're cheap too. So yeah, you can click right there. If you'd like to reach out to us in any other way besides Twitter, we also have our emails here and our Instagram as well. So that is available for you as well.
Well, super. So just great resources, great presentation. Thank you so much, Nate and Angie, who was just wonderful. To all the attendees, there's going to be a recording that we're going to send out to you. You'll be able to access this later. So those of you that might have been driving this morning and trying to chat away, you can come back and get all this great information. And with that, I think we're coming to a close. So I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend today. Thank you to the presenters, and also to Valentine and Classtime. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Enjoy your day.
Yes.
Bye-bye.